It's time for the Full Press Hockey Podcast with Jim Biringer and Bruce Zeman.
Shoots! He scores!
And now, with a trip around the National Hockey League, here's Jim and Bruce.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Full Press NHL Podcast. Special collaboration here, Big Apple Hockey Podcast. You saw us out in Vegas, the NHL Draft. I'm your host, Jim Biringer. Anthony LaRocco here from the Hockey News, covers Canes, Carolina Hurricanes, and Vegas Golden Knights. But he knows all his hockey because, like I said, we were out at the Sphere. What a great time that was, partner. Welcome back, buddy.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to hop on and talk some hockey. And like we just said before we went on, things were kind of just dead for a while in the news cycle, and now there's a decent amount of things to talk about. So it's definitely a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, just everything at the beginning of this week, just popped, felt like it was Friday the 13th, just come out of nowhere with everything, with the offer sheets, Edmonton Oilers, two players, Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway with the offer sheets by St. Louis. We'll touch on that in a little bit. But the big news, I got to start in the mecca of the hockey world. I know Montreal. I always say this all the time, as much as I love Montreal. The hockey world revolves around the Toronto Maple Leafs and Toronto. That's the center of hockey up in Canada. John Tavares stripped to the sea, and Auston Matthews, the new captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs. It'll be announced as we're recording this podcast, and they have their press conference, but the news is out there. Your thoughts on that?
Again, I'm not surprised. John Tavares has 1 year remaining on his contract. Auston Matthews much younger. Clear as day. He's the future of the Toronto Maple Leafs Hockey Club. I think it was interesting. We say he's been stripped, and I think that's going to be the narrative. But I know a lot of the insiders mentioned that Tavares had a big role in this, along with Brad Treliving, to come to this decision. So I don't think it's like your typical a captain getting stripped in years prior that we've seen teams make changes. I mean, you saw it happen in San Jose years ago on Marlowe. And so in that regard, I think it was more of a collaboration. But yeah, again, I'm not surprised by it. I think, there's certainly a chance that, Tavares ends his tenure with Toronto at the end of the year. And moves on. But then again, he might just, re-sign on a much cheaper deal and end his career there. But nonetheless, I do think it's the right move for the Maple Leafs. It just makes sense when you can kind of consider everything as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look at it with the insiders are saying, and obviously on this podcast months ago, I had a guest on, and we had talked about this, and the right thing to do is go to Tavares and say, hey, this is the direction we're going in. And I think that's what they did. I 100%. That's something that we're probably going to hear when the Leafs talk about, Auston Matthews. But this has been Auston Matthews' team for a long time now. Obviously, what he does goal scoring wise, but you could tell. I mean, look, we could talk about the robotics and the answers and all this stuff, and Morgan Riley finally showing some emotion. But I think you're going to see different personality now with Auston Matthews. He's going to be in the spotlight, and I think like you said, with Tavares going into the final year of his deal that he signed, back in the summer, about 6-7 years ago now, at $77 million with that $11 million AAV, it gives him a chance just to focus on hockey and help this team win instead of just always being in the spotlight. Because let's be honest, I don't know how many people are tired of hearing about the learning lessons. I mean, the classroom went over to Team Canada this year too. Joking aside, but it does kind of get old when we're hearing about learning lessons 7 years, 5 years, losing all the time in the first round of the playoffs.
Yeah, you bring up emotion. I think that's a perfect, kind of, not really a segue, but it's good to mention that because John Tavares throughout his career has been known to be like, a robot at times. He's been called. He doesn't show much emotion. He's very stoic. I think Auston Matthews has a much larger personality, louder personality. So I think it's a totally different shift in the philosophy of the captain that they want there in that organization. But again, it just makes sense to make the move now. It's like, the inevitable is if Tavares leaves, then they were going to do this anyway. So for them to kind of get ahead of it by a year and do it ahead of time, I actually like that move by Brad Treliving. The thing I wonder about is I'm early in the offseason, Nick Kiprios on his, platform podcast, I guess it was Sportsnet, was saying like, in terms of trying to get Tavares to agree to leave, it's like you approach him, you strip him of the C, and you say you want to go in a different direction. And while that didn't quite exactly happen, because they're not trying to push him out the door, they still did remove the C from him. So I am curious to see how, that translates to his play on the ice. Does he play more free, and does he get back to closer to being an 80-point player? I know this past season, I think he only had 60-something points. So I'm curious to see if this kind of takes some pressure off his shoulders.
Yeah, and you were there on the island when he was the captain of the Islanders, and they got back to the playoffs for the first time. What was that like interaction like? Were you able to get him one-on-one without the camera? Because is he different without the camera than he is with the camera?
I was not, but from everything I hear, he's basically the same on and off camera. He's, like I said, he's very reserved. He's strictly just like business. He's always thinking about his team and ways to win. So I don't know. I mean, I'm sure, yeah, when he's at home with his family, I'm sure he's a lot different. But I think even off camera, when he's talking to people in the media, I think he's still pretty much the same variation of who he is on camera. I think he was a good captain for the Islanders, and I think he was a good captain for the Maple Leafs too. For me, when you're talking about Tavares specifically in the Maple Leafs, it goes back to when the Maple Leafs signed him. I felt that they didn't need to sign him at that point. It was almost because, like, hometown boy, he wanted to go there, so they felt obligated to kind of make it happen. But I never thought that the Maple Leafs needed to sign him, and he didn't. I mean, let's face it, Jim. He didn't really move the needle for the Toronto Maple Leafs. In his tenure there, the Islanders have won, I think, like 5 or 6 playoff series, or maybe even more than that. And the Maple Leafs have won, what, 2? No, 1. I think they only made
one. They only won 1. Yeah, they only won 1. And look, Johnny T was the reason why they did it. JT91 was the reason they did it, because they beat Tampa.
That is true. He scored, yeah.
But still, the Islanders have more playoff series victories in that time than the Leafs do. And I agree with you 100%. I was a big proponent when it happened, and everybody can say, Monday morning quarterback, revisionist history. I can find stuff where I was saying, like you, the Toronto Maple Leafs did not need to make this move with John Tavares. At that time, they needed goaltending and defense. Yeah. They had offense already. They had the players. They didn't need Tavares.
You're absolutely right. They had Marner there already, Matthews, Nylander. They didn't need him, and I guess
Kadri was there at that time too.
Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was. You're absolutely right. They had enough firepower, and that's why when you further talk about the Maple Leafs, it's like at the end of the year when Shanahan had that press conference with upper management, he made it seem like this was going to be the year where they finally made some really big changes, breaking up the core 4. And once again, they're doing the same exact thing by pretty much bringing the same team back. So I don't understand it. I don't see how this coming year plays out any differently for them. And if they happen to, lose in the first round of the playoffs again, there's going to be serious consequences in Toronto because, I mean, Jim, the definition of insanity is keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. And I think that's what's going on there with Toronto, even with the change in captaincy.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, look, Marner is UFA at the end of the year. Tavares is UFA at the end of the year. I mean, we all expected one of them to at least get moved. At least it was going to be Marner because, Tavares, captain, okay, he's probably not going anywhere. He wants to be here. Yeah. Great. Okay, fine. But now everybody's got no movement clauses. They all can decide where they want to go. You got to play hardball with some of these guys. And I think you said it best. If they don't want to bring back Tavares, this is the route you have to go on. Say, hey, all right, bud, we're probably not going to bring you back. If we do, it's going to be on a cheap deal. You're not going to get $6-7 million again. You're not that player. You're not even a second line center anymore. All right, this is the scenarios we're running through here, and we have a younger team now. They always can extend Marner, but again, the same thing over and over again. Like, when are we going to change it up?
Yeah, and I think it's funny that Marner kind of used that no movement clause that they gave to him, and he kind of stuck it to Toronto because he didn't want to go anywhere. He wanted to stay in Toronto. He held all the power, and same thing with Tavares. So I am very curious to see how this plays out into this season and going into next summer. Because if Mitch Marner walks out the door for nothing, there's going to be some questions asked about why didn't you trade him last year before his no movement clause kicked in on July 1st. They had that window where they could have moved him before that kicked in, and they didn't. So if he walks to free agency and leaves for nothing, there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking say you should have moved him when you had the chance, or you should have done more to try to move him. Because if you lose a guy like him for nothing, that's going to hurt your team. Definitely.
But can you see the other side of it where the Maple Leafs could come out and say they don't trade him at the deadline, say it gets to the point where they can't trade his rights and he hits, UFA, they could play the PR game and be like, hey, look, we tried to move you. We wanted to move you. You decided not to do it. And I know Marner's a big guy about Toronto legacy, all that stuff. Yeah. They could play the PR game and be like, look, you didn't help us out. Now we're going to bury you in the media. I mean, look, I don't know if they're going to do that, but again, I think they're playing hardball with him for sure.
Yeah, and that's a good point. But to counter that, they could then, fans and media can respond, yes, true, he had a no movement clause, he didn't want to go anywhere. But again, you had that time where you could have traded him last summer before that no movement clause kicked in, when you had the leverage, and now that's gone. So, and with Tavares, I'm interested to see what happens to him, because they desperately need his $11 million cap hit off the books. I'm curious if they bring him back on a short-term deal, or he, goes elsewhere.
I would be surprised too. If they do bring him back, it's probably 3-4 years, or 3 years at the 4 or something reasonable where they can do it, because they still have holes to fill on that roster.
Absolutely do. Yeah, and that put the cart before the horse, or whatever the saying is, but. If Igor Shesterkin hits unrestricted free agency next summer, with Marner and Tavares possibly coming off the books, I can assure you Toronto would make a huge pitch at him.
I would think so.
2025.
Yeah, that would be something sight to see with Igor Shesterkin in a Toronto Maple Leafs jersey, because he's going to want to be the highest paid goaltender in the NHL right now.
Yeah, that's what
it's crazy. No, let's just stay on that for a minute, because you think about it, it's kind of flying under the radar around here, because everybody talked about Jacob Trouba and the Rangers. He could potentially be on the move, but that's kind of sneaking under the radar right now, because he's entering the final year of his deal. He was eligible to sign an extension July 1st. He hasn't yet. We know the reports of him being the highest paid goalie. Look, if the Rangers can figure out a way to keep him in the 10s, that's huge, but I think the starting number has got to be at least 11.
Yeah, and there's a lot of pushback on that, giving a goalie that much. We talked about it on our show, and a lot of my colleagues, they don't want to pay him anywhere really over 10 and a half. They want to come in at 9.5, which I don't know if that's going to happen. But the one thing I pointed out is his friend across the river, Ilya Sorokin, he signed the second he was eligible last year. He signed right away. So, showing that he really wanted to be there. With Igor Shesterkin, the question is, why hasn't he signed yet? They play it's New York City. They're a contender year in and year out. Why wouldn't you re-up with them already? So, then again, every situation is different. Every player is different. And, this seems to be a more complicated negotiation just because of how much he potentially could be asking for. But NHL Network, what was it, last week? They did their top 10 goalies right now. He was number one, and rightfully so. He was awesome in the playoffs. But for me, if he's gonna get $11-12 million, Jim, and I know playoffs is when it matters, but if you look at his last 2 regular seasons, his save percentage last 2 seasons ranked somewhere around 10 and 11 respectively. If I'm paying a goalie $11 million, I don't want him to be 11th in the league in save percentage at a middling 912. I want him to be at 927 year in and year out if I'm paying him that much money. So that's my pushback with paying him that much. Yes, he was phenomenal in the playoffs. He is certainly one of the best goaltenders in the league. He's elite. But his numbers during the regular season since his Vezina win haven't been where I think they should be for a guy of his caliber.
Look, totally fair statements. But again, for me, I think like the offensive guys have gotten a little bit better. So I think save percentage now, it's a tough stat, but I do agree with you. I think it's got to be higher if you're going to pay him. If they can get him, under 10, that's a steal and that's a win for the New York Rangers, because then that allows them to do more work up front, trying to actually find a top winger for their guys with Kreider, Zibanejad, figure out what they got going, maybe shed some space other ways, add some depth some other places. So that if they can get him under 10, man, that's a big victory.
Yeah, you know what? I mentioned he's great friends with Sorokin, but I would think that, the Rangers may point to Connor Hellebuck's contract as a comparable and say, this is why, Igor, we should pay you more similar to Hellebuck's AAV, because they both have Vezina trophies. They're similar in that regard. So the Rangers may use that as leverage. Big look, you have Vezina, Hellebuck has a Vezina. He didn't get $10+ million. So I'm curious to see how that negotiation behind closed doors is going, because I could see the Rangers saying, using comparables, showing that he should be around, 8.5, 9, maybe 9.5. And it's possible he may be looking at it and say, okay, well, I want Sergei Bobrovsky, I want Carey Price money. So I think there's a disconnect there.
Yeah, I think so too. And, that's a story that I'm going to be watching. Another story that gave us news this week, obviously Tuesday, with the offer sheets by the St. Louis Blues, Philip Broberg and Dylan Holloway of the Edmonton Oilers each get 2-year offer sheets. Broberg around $4.5 million, and then Holloway around $2.2 million. And that puts the Edmonton Oilers in a bind. Were you surprised by this move by the Blues?
I was very surprised. Listen, we don't really see offer sheets too often. The last one was 2021.
Yeah, Kotkaniemi. Yeah, Kotkaniemi was it, and that was payback for the Aho offer sheet by the Canadiens.
So anytime you see it used, it's always a little surprising. And what makes it even more, rare is that it's two players on the same team that got the offer sheet. So the Blues going hard after new general manager Stan Bowman there in Edmonton. But you know what? I think Evander Kane going in LTIR will help them, because the rumor is he might need surgery. So that will help their cap situation. But even with him going on LTIR, if they match both deals, I think they're going to be slightly over the cap, and they would have to make another move, whether it be waiving somebody or trying to trade a contract out. So, you know what? I'm more leaning towards the fact that they match on Holloway, because it's only $2.28 million. It's reasonable for a young player. Broberg, 4.5 is, I think, a little high for him at this point in his career. And then, Jim, if you also remember, the Oilers were shopping him, and he had asked for a trade back in December. So you have that history there of maybe of the two sides wanting a change of scenery. So when you combine that, I think it kind of points to the Oilers saying, okay, we'll take the compensation for Broberg, and we'll keep Holloway. So that's my early kind of guess on how they handle this. I think they have 6 more days to decide what they're going to do. But I would be equally surprised if they let both go and if they matched both. That's just my opinion. I think they're gonna, like I said, match on Holloway and let Broberg go.
Yeah, I mean, they could do both, but like you said, you'd have to trade either Kulak or Cody Ceci. Yeah. And look, Ceci's, has every bit. The fans love to pick on Cody Ceci up there in Edmonton, and rightfully so. His play hasn't really been the greatest, and I agree. Philip Broberg, for a guy that could potentially play third line minutes and has the potential to be a second line guy. Yeah. Look, he was great in the Stanley Cup final. I saw what he did firsthand. I thought he was great, but $4.5 million for that kind of player right now is high. And look, good on the Blues and Doug Armstrong for doing it. I think this has made Stan Bowman choose one or the other. And I agree. I think they're probably going to keep Holloway over Broberg and let Broberg walk, as much as it stinks to lose a defenseman like that. Then it's only $2.2 million. You could figure out waivers and all that stuff. You may still have to move a player, because I think I saw, according to Puckpedia, they're still over the cap by $7 million. with all the moves that they made in the summer, with keeping Perry, Henrique, bringing in Arvidsson, Skinner, all that stuff. And apparently, to go back to what you were saying about Broberg and Holloway now too, according to reports that I was listening to, I believe it was Bob Stauffer, he was saying that these things should have been done in January, like these extensions for both players. Yeah. So that even adds a little bit more fuel to the fire about what's going on, because the direction of this team and how to handle young players, okay, this is your development plan, what was not, communicated to these guys. So I think they go Holloway and let Broberg go, but you never know. I mean, I think they're going to take as much time as needed with these moves.
Yeah, I mean, they're going to probably take the full, 7 days and make – because there's no incentive to make a decision and let St. Louis kind of off the hook. Because in the meantime, St. Louis's hands are tied. If they had any other moves in the hopper here, they can't really do anything until Edmonton makes its decision. So there's a little bit of a game going on now, too, in gamesmanship. But I was really surprised to see it. Honestly, I love seeing it. I love seeing kind of like the movement and the surprise factor to it. And not that I think it's going to happen, but I also wonder if other general managers seeing this offer sheet, kind of would maybe entice another team to take a look at some of the remaining RFAs and, see if they wanted to dip their toe into the offer sheet pool, because there are some, kind of high profile RFAs that are still unsigned, that are still out there.
I mean, you mentioned Jeremy Swayman's out there, and they never went to arbitration, so he was eligible for a while. Mo Seider and Lucas Raymond in Detroit, and obviously Dawson Mercer in New Jersey is another one. And look, if a team wants to be ruthless like St. Louis was, they could say to the Devils, okay, we're going to give Mercer $6 million on an offer sheet, and the Devils really couldn't do much about it. They would have to make a move or two to get that because they only have $4.7 million on the salary cap right now.
Yeah, no, it definitely forces your hand, and it makes teams have to make some hard decisions. If we want to keep this player, we're going to have to make some serious moves to accommodate it. So it certainly throws a monkey wrench in. And, you mentioned Jeremy Swayman. Interesting thing about that is we all know Olmark's gone. He's in Ottawa. So if a team threw an offer sheet at Swayman, the Bruins would literally have no choice. No choice but to match it. No matter how ridiculous it was. Even if a team wanted to give him, $9 million or $10 million. I'm not saying that's not going to happen because it's not. But hypothetically, if it did, the Bruins would have to match that because then what would be their goaltending situation?
Jonas Korpisalo would be their starter.
Yeah. So, but no, I like to see it, and I am curious to see how it plays out over these next 6 days.
Real quick, staying on this topic, do you think now with the because this is just running through my head when I was writing some things, with the salary cap potentially going up again next year and over the subsequent seasons, is this something we may see going forward, more of these offer sheets? Because it's kind of been an unwritten rule, gentleman's agreement. We don't do it, all this stuff. I wonder if that kind of gets thrown out the window now with the cap going up. I think you will see more, and I think you could see some retribution from the Oilers and Stan Bowman to the St. Louis Blues. I mean, next year Jake Neighbors is an RFA. Do the Oilers kind of stick it to him and get their revenge by offer sheeting him? And typically when you do see an offer sheet, you do see that revenge factor come into play. You already mentioned with the Hurricanes and the Canadiens, you saw it a few years ago, the fallout from offer sheeting Aho and then Kotkaniemi. And if you go years back, if you remember, I don't know if it was the Oilers or the Blues that did it, but they offer sheeted Thomas Vanek, and the Sabres matched. But then retribution came the following year, and I forget what player it was that they tried to do it on, but it happens. It happens. Teams eventually circle back. I think was it back? Maybe it might have been David Backes.
Yeah, it might have been. Because I think Ryan Kessler got an offer sheet too at some point, and I think Backes did get an offer sheet as well. I'd have to refresh my memory there, but yeah, you see that revenge factor come into play.
Oh, 100%. And I like it. But I wish it was just a tactic we saw more of, because it's in the CBA. It's all legal.
Yeah.
And these guys just get, they get annoyed by it. Right. I mean, you're surprised by it, but you're like, but it's a tactic. Why don't you use it more? Because we see it in other sports. I just don't get it. But like you said, I know, like, because Vanek was offered one by Edmonton. Backus was offered one by Vancouver. Steve Bernier was offered one. Yarmulson was offered one, and obviously and then obviously the famous one was the Shea Weber and the Ryan O'Reilly ones. But I mean, this is in the salary cap era. Remember, Brian Burke wanted to fight somebody over the Dustin Penner. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
It's in the rules. You guys agreed to this thing. But, we'll see if it happens, because, you want to put teams in these uncomfortable scenarios, because you see it around the National Hockey League. And I think it's a great segue over to the Vegas Golden Knights, because a lot of teams have been letting them off the hook with their salary cap problems over the flat cap era, along with the Tampa Bay Lightning. But what were your thoughts on the Golden Knights, like, offseason? Were their offseason moves done more at the trade deadline, or could they have done more this offseason?
Yeah, you know what? I think this is the first year really since they've been in the league where I kind of said to myself that they didn't improve their team from the prior year. They lost a lot of guys. I mean, obviously Jonathan Marchessault most notably went to Nashville at Stamkos. That's a big loss. Scored 42 goals last year. Chandler Stevenson, again, another, he was one of their top 6 centers, out the door to Seattle. And then they lost the depth players too. Michael Amadio went to Ottawa. William Carrier went to Carolina. Alec Martinez left. So they, Anthony Mantha, even though he was only there for a short time after they acquired him, he left. So they lost a lot of players. And the only guys they brought in at the forward position were Alexander Holtz and Victor Olofsson, which 2 guys who are unproven that are looking to really, kind of like second chances, if you will. So they're not sure things. So yeah, when you look at that Golden Knights roster, I think there's no doubt that they got a little weaker for sure. I don't really think that part's up for debate. I mean, I think they're relying on progression from Brandon Brisson, one of their top prospects. They're hoping that he could step into the lineup and provide some offense. And obviously Alexander Holtz, I just mentioned, he has a high pedigree. I think they're hoping with more ice time that he could be the player that the Devils thought he would be when they drafted him. And then Victor Olofsson, a few short years ago, he had 28 goals for Buffalo. And then last year, he had an abysmal year. So I think, again, they're banking on him maybe in a little more of an extended role that he could score close to 30 goals. But these are almost like, they're not like necessarily risks, but they're not sure. They didn't bring in like surefire top 6 established forwards. So yeah, I think they're weaker. But Kelly McCrimmon knows what he's doing. Maybe he thought that they had a chance to acquire a guy like Mitch Marner that would have been on the market and never was. Maybe he was kind of relying on that. Maybe he thought he can get a deal done for Nikolai Ehlers or Marty Necas, because those names were out there long before the draft. And they haven't moved. So yeah, there could have been kind of pieces that he had in play that didn't come to fruition. But it is what it is at this point. We're mid-August, and the team that the Knights have on paper right now might be the team that hit the ice in October.
Yeah, and don't forget the depth at goalie too. Logan Thompson got traded as well during the draft as well. Yeah. But you mentioned Holtz, and I got to agree with you. I think this kid is going to be. I think he's going to be good for the Vegas Golden Knights, because when I scouted him and I saw him when the Devils drafted him, he's a goal scorer. That's what he is. The Devils tried to make him into a player that he wasn't. And I know Bruce Cassidy likes those board battles, and he likes, guys playing two-way hockey too. But I think he's going to let him be the guy that the Devils should have let him be, like we're seeing with Lucas Raymond, the other half of the quote-unquote Terror Twins that were for Team Sweden at the World Juniors. Like, let him be a goal scorer. And, that was part of – and they have Akira Schmid there now. He's in the system. And, that was part of the Paul Cotter trade that New Jersey got. But, to me, I think looking at it from the outside, it feels like they're relying on a healthy Thomas Hertl this year to be the guy that they expected him to be at the deadline when they got him. I know he was still hurt, so we really didn't know what Hertl was going to be. But now if the Vegas can stay healthy, I mean, they're still a contender there, but I agree. I think they took a step back.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm not saying that they're going to, miss the playoffs or anything, but I do think it's going to be a little bit of a uphill battle for them in that tough Pacific division. They're good teams in that division. But one thing you can't count out, Jim, is like anytime, and this is why, again, I'm surprised that they didn't add anybody this summer. Vegas, in typical Vegas fashion, the bright lights, the attention, and they acquire pretty much any premier player that gets on the market. They're always involved. I mean, Hurdle, Mark Stone, Noah Hannafin, Jack Eichel. It's like anytime a premier player is available on the market, they're in the mix, and a lot of times they acquire them. So you can't count that out. Kelly McCrimmon may have something up his sleeve at some point during the year, and maybe closer to trade deadline time, acquires a top 6 player. But right now, like I said, I think the team that they have is going to probably be the team that they have when the puck drops in October. But I still envision them to be a top 3 team in the division. But I think, with a team like LA, I think, fighting for that 3rd spot / wild card is going to be a battle. It's going to be tight.
Yeah, I think so too. Obviously you mentioned Kelly McCrimmon. He's part of the, I'm in the winning business, not the hockey business. And I love that quote. It just sticks with me because he looks ahead at his team and says, hey, you know what can we do to improve, or what do I see that I can, maybe step aside away from, move on from. And look, I saw his quotes about Marcia. So he's like, I can't go past 3 years with this player. The uncertainty, the aging player, even though his production was high, he's like, I can't go past 3 years. I get that too. And I get it. But again, he was one of your leading goal scorers last year. It's tough not to see, one of the original Golden Misfits not there anymore. But I always watch for Vegas like you do, just like, okay, what's up their sleeve? Like they're too quiet. What's going on here? Like, I feel like I agree. I feel like something big's going to come. It may not come at the beginning of the year, but I feel like they may be doing something.
Yeah, but the thing is, they're a little bit handcuffed too, because when Robin Leonard goes on LTIR, they're only going to have like $1 million and change in cap space. So for them to do anything sizable, they would have to send out a contract that has a decent cap hit. So I had wondered earlier in the offseason about Shea Theodore. He's in the last year of his contract. Would they have moved someone like him to get a top 6 forward, whether it be, Patrick Laine or Nikolai Ehlers? Obviously, that didn't come. But yeah, you're right. There are a team to watch once the season starts. But again, if they do make a big move, they are going to have to send out a contract.
Yeah. So the team to watch, like always in the West, because, when Vegas is like the team that flies under the radar, I feel like they're, a little bit more dangerous. When they're always at the top, and they've been at the top since they've come into the league, but it feels like, okay, are they finally hitting that expansion plateau where it's like, okay, what's next? Because everybody expects winning there.
Yeah. Well, no, that's what all they're used to. I mean, they've made it to the finals in their first year. So it's kind of just expected of the fans that they're going to win and they're going to compete. So, the mandate for that organization, owner Bill Foley, is to, win at all costs. So again, I'm sure McCrimmon's going to do something to try to improve the team. I just, like you said earlier, I don't know when it's going to come.
Yeah. Another team that you've been covering, Carolina Hurricanes, another team that made a lot of moves this offseason. Yeah. Do you, like with Vegas, do you feel they took a step back with the players that they lost and the players that they brought in?
Again, yeah, I do. And I wrote about it. They lost bona fide top 6 forwards in Teuvo Teravainen and Jake Gensel. And the players they brought in are more, middle 6 to bottom 6 players. Tyson Yost, Eric Robinson. These guys are Jack Roslovic. They're middle 6 players. They're nowhere near the caliber player of Jake Gensel and Teuvo Teravainen. So, when you lose those 2 guys from your forward group and you really don't adequately replace them, that makes things tough. And especially in a metropolitan division where, the Jersey Devils, no doubt, no question about it, got a lot better. The Rangers are pretty much, they didn't get any better, but then again, they didn't get any worse really. So they're still going to be there. And then you have a team like the Islanders, which you never know what you're going to get from them, but they're going to be fighting for that, maybe the 3 spot. So the competition in the Metro is going to be tough. It always is. And, right now, I think, the Hurricanes got a little weaker. I mean, I do like how they brought back a familiar face in Shane Gostisbehere. I know he's not the best defensively, but they know he worked there. He's got a big shot from the point. But I mean, still though, losing Brett Pesce, who's one of the better defensive defensemen in the league, that one hurts too. So, and then you also, what are you going to get from Freddie Anderson? I know he had the clotting issue last year, and he came back in the playoffs and he looked really good. But can he stay healthy? If he does stay healthy, what version of him are you going to get? Does a guy like Seth Jarvis kind of had a breakout year last year, scored over 30 goals, which, by the way, he's still unsigned. Can he provide that type of production again? There's certainly some questions in Carolina. Similar Vegas, I think they're going to be, I'd be surprised if they drastically fell off, but I'm not so confident that last year the Rangers and the Hurricanes were kind of separated by a few points, fighting for that first spot in the Metro. Yeah. I'm not sure. It might not be as tight this year. I think Carolina might fall back to the 2 seed, but more of a gap between them and first. But we'll see how it goes.
And obviously they were able to keep, Slavin, and they were able to keep Marty Natchez on short-term deals, and Jarvis is still out there. But I agree. I think defensively, they definitely took a step back. Obviously, Rob Brendamore's still there as a coach. Eric Tolsky's now the new GM there because Don Waddell's over in Columbus, staying within the division. But Carolina's, even though to me they took a step back, I have a feeling they could still be in the top 3. Though, as you mentioned, the competition in the Metro, especially with the moves Washington made, has me wondering, okay, who's really going to be in this top 4 now?
Yeah. No. I mean, I give Washington credit. I know Brian McClellan, stepped down. He's not the GM anymore, but he made some good moves prior to that. I think the PLD move, Jim, is risky. I mean, his contract's so large, and the guy had 40 points last year, and he makes close to. He made $8 million as cap hit.
Around over 8. He makes over $8 million.
That's just unacceptable. So if the problem is if he turns out another performance where he's putting up 40 points, now I mean that deal doesn't really look so good because he took on such a large commitment in that contract, overpaid, and he's not producing, which the Kings are facing. But they're hoping that a change of scenery and maybe playing with a guy like. Alexander Ovechkin could kind of reignite him. So I did like that move. I think the Mangiapane move is similar. They're banking on him trying to get back to when he scored 34 goals a few years ago. But, again, if he doesn't, then he is what he is. He's like a guy that's going to score you 19, 20 goals, which isn't bad. But again, I don't know how much he moves the needle, really. I still think despite their moves, I know Jacob Chikrin, I do like that one. But I still think the Capitals are on the downward trajectory. I mean, I don't view them as being a team that's going to finish in a top 3 spot in the Metro. Could they sneak in a wild card spot again? Sure. I mean, if Charlie Lindgren plays well and, PLD can, get back to the level that he's capable of playing for, can Dylan Strome replicate his year last year? If a lot of these things happen, then the Capitals could find themselves back in the playoffs. But I put the Capitals in the same book as the Penguins. They're a team that's on the downward trend. I mean, they're older. Ovechkin's older. I mean, Oshie, is he going to play? Is he not going to play?
Yeah, that's a big question mark.
So I don't know. The Caps are your prototypical bubble team to me.
Yeah. No, I think so, and that means that the division probably goes, with the Rangers, Devils, Carolina, whatever order you want to put it in, because I think those are the top 3 teams in the division right now, even with the moves Carolina made. The Islanders, I always feel like they're in a class of their own. because you don't know what you're going to get from the Islanders from year to year, game to game.
You really don't. You really don't. The one thing I'll kind of say about the Islanders is, and what I'm about to say is basically the same thing I said when like they acquired Bo Horvat. Like he got there, him and Barzal had great chemistry. They started out fast, then Barzal got hurt, and then Horvat struggled the rest of the season. But I had said like the guy just moved cross country from Vancouver. I'm like, give him a year with a full training camp to build that chemistry with Barzal, and you're going to really see the player he was. And I mean, Horvat was fantastic this year. I think he scored 33 goals. He got Barzal back up to 80 points for the first time since his rookie year. So with Waugh, it's the same vein. Waugh took over a team in January. It's hard to come in, take over a team that is in disarray in the middle of the season and, really change things around overnight. I think with Waugh now having a full training camp to really instill his style of play and hammer it home, I think that you're going to see a big change with the Islanders in their play this coming year. I think that alone is going to make them a little better with Waugh having a full camp to really kind of put his mark on the team. So, I mean, we'll see what happens. I do like the addition of Anthony Duclair. He's a guy that can score 25 goals. He's got good speed. And the wild card, Jim, here is Maxim Siplikov. There were 12 plus NHL teams that were interested in signing him in the KHL, and he chose the Islanders. And he had a good year. He had a good year last year in the KHL. I interviewed Shane Prince shortly after the signing, who was a teammate of him over in the KHL for Moscow, where he was playing. And he said the signing was great. He's like, this is a big body power forward, but it has a lot of skill. And he's like, it's about time an NHL team took a chance on him. He's like, I think his game will transition to the NHL pretty well. So, I'm not saying I'm not saying he's going to have like an Andrei Kuzmenko type of year where he scores like 39 goals and 73 points. But, if he's closer to Kuzmenko rather than like Shipachyov, who tried to come over Vegas years, like, so basically if the Islanders get like a solid 45, 50 points from Siplikov, that could really help them.
I mean, considering the biggest thing that we've talked about with the Islanders has always been goal scoring and offense, because they always need it and they never have it. I mean, look, they can score goals, don't get me wrong, but it just feels like they don't do it on a consistent basis. And when their goals for and where they rank is near the bottom of the league, it's like, okay, when is the offense coming to this team? Mm-hmm. And that's the big thing for me always every year with the Islanders. But now the big question is, you mentioned it, when you were talking about Waugh in the offseason, who does he go to as the guy? Because we saw last year at the end, it was Varlamov when Sorokin had just signed, as you mentioned, that extension. Yeah. Like, is he going to finally trust, Sorokin to be the guy there?
Yeah, I think so. And I think there was a lot that was made of that and kind of like overblown, like, oh, he doesn't have faith in Sorokin. Or I think it was a matter of he was a new coach. He's trying to get his team into the playoffs. He saw that Varlamov was playing better at the time. And then, he knows Varlamov. He has that relationship with him in Colorado. So naturally, when you combine the fact that he was playing better, he felt more comfortable going to Varlamov. But, I mentioned the NHL Network's top 10 goalies right now. They did last week. They still rank Sorokin as the fifth, as number 5. And rightfully so, because prior to last year, the last 2 seasons, he was 4th and 2nd in save percentage, and goals against average. He was in the top 5 too. So he's been elite goalie ever since he came to the league. I think just last year, this is sports, man. He struggled. He had an off year. So I think he's going to come into camp with a man on a mission. I think he knows he needs to be better. I think Waugh's going to see that. And I think, Waugh's going to treat him as the starting goalie to start the year. Yeah, if God forbid he's still playing like he did last year, then he'll go back to Varlamov. But I think he's going to give Sorokin every chance to be a starter out of the gate. And I think you're going to see a Sorokin that's, again, top 5 in, every statistical category in goaltending. I think that's what's going to happen this coming season.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's going to happen too. Couple more things before we wrap it up. The big one. Obviously, you mentioned Pittsburgh before. Everybody thought, and I saw your tweet about it.
Yeah,
8-7.
8-7.
Yeah. Like
Yeah.
why? How come Sidney
Yeah.
Crosby didn't sign on
Yeah.
8-7? He's so
Yeah.
superstitious. All that stuff. Do you think when do we see Crosby? Because my theory is it's probably going to happen like training camp around. Sometime then they're going to finally announce this thing. But if it doesn't get announced at the start of the year, before the start, this is going to be a big time storyline because it already was like a hot take coming out of north of the border.
Yep.
This could get real like juicy if he is not signed early into the season and this drags to the trade deadline.
So I saw a tweet from Josh Yo, who covers the Penguins. I didn't click it. I just kind of read the headline, but he was alluding to the fact like, Crosby's not signed yet. Is there any reason to, at what point is there any reason to worry that it hasn't happened yet? And which is kind of you're referencing. And yeah, it comes to a certain point where if he's not signed yet, then when do you start saying, is there something that maybe that's going on behind the scenes, like a reason why he hasn't signed yet. And I don't think that's anywhere near that point yet. I mean, I think Crosby looks at, Mario Lemieux, who was his mentor, and how he played for one team his whole career. I think Crosby wants to be that player in Pittsburgh and finish his career there. I don't see him going anywhere. I mean, I really don't. I would be really, really surprised. Sometimes these things just take time. However, Jim, if, trade deadline comes or around that time, the Penguins are clear they're going to miss the playoffs, then there are going to be some interesting conversations at that point. And then, then it's going to be a serious issue there. But, I think right now Penguins shouldn't really worry.
Yeah.
I think it'll get done.
Yeah, I think it'll get done too. But again, like you said, the longer this drags out, we know he wants to play Four Nations face-off Olympics next year.
Yeah.
He's going to want to play, for Team Canada at least one more time at the Olympics. So, but again, the longer this goes on, if it'll get to a point where it's just like, okay, what's happening here? Because, we all expected him to sign right away. Yeah. He didn't. Yeah. Now 8-7's passed. He didn't. Okay. Starting training camp, because he's the kind of guy that's going to want to be like, okay, you know what? I'm going to talk about it or I'm going to get it done. So this isn't a story. Like that's the kind of player he is. But then again, you don't know because he's seen all these changes. He's seen what Dubas is doing. He's like, I don't know what's going on here, but we know what the mandate is coming out of Pittsburgh. It's win with those guys. Try to win one more time with those guys.
Yeah. I mean, if that's the mandate, try to win one more time with these guys. I mean, what is Dubas doing? I mean, he traded for Kevin Hayes, who, I mean, he was a shell of himself. I mean, Anthony Beauvillier, I mean, I think that doesn't really move the needle.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. So, well, I don't know exactly what's going on there, but well, who knows? Maybe Dubas has something up his sleeve to try to show Crosby that I'm really going to try to win this year for you. At least, kind of give him a little enticement to re-sign. But yeah, I still think Pittsburgh, like I said earlier, I think Pittsburgh's on the downward trend here. Yeah,
I think so too. I think they're probably going to miss, and Columbus will be there as well because obviously the Line A rumors still floating around. Where he goes, he's finally out of the program, and he's got 2 years left on that $8.7 million contract. It's just got to wonder. Probably I don't know if it happens right away, but I do think that Columbus will be able to move that. But it all depends on retention and. Is the team willing to take on the full contract? But I think they want to see Line A play first too.
Yeah, and I think there's a risk there. Obviously there was the injury issues, and then on top of that, he was in the player assistance program for whatever he was dealing with at the time, and that could be a concern for some teams. But I saw some videos appear on X of him training this summer. One was like in Florida. He was with some NFL players. Like doing some, exercising on the field, and then there was another video I saw the other day. He's in the gym. He's kind of like he has an Olympic-sized bar, and he's picking it up from one end and like doing like squats with it. So like he looks to be in great shape. He looks to be Not only that, but in feeling good mentally too. So he might be a man on a mission to prove something. So team, if you can kind of get him on the cheap right now, he might reward you with a huge season.
100%.
Yeah, I do think he'll be moved. Like you said, I'm just not sure if teams want to see him play first or if it still could happen before the season.
Yeah, I think that's one that we're going to be waiting on. A lot. There's been a lot of movement. It was fast paced with everything that happened at the end. Then we took some time off. Now we got some stories. Feels like it's going to quiet down again. But I'm just glad to have you here on the podcast again, discussing some hockey here, Anthony.
Yeah. Thanks for having me anytime, and look forward to for later this evening you hopping on our show, Big Apple Hockey Podcast, with Mark Williams and John Filkowski, my counterparts. We'll talk about some more things. We have some interesting things. The segment to have you on for, get your take on it. So yeah, it'll be fun. And I guess the last thing I'll add is, it's August 14th. That means you're talking maybe like 5 weeks the training camp starts. So, players are slowly these next week or two are going to start to filter back into their home cities for informal skates and everything. So we are getting close. It's on the horizon. The start of the season and training camp here, it's coming quick.
It is coming quick. Can you tell everybody where they can find you?
Yeah. So Big Apple Hockey Podcast. We're on YouTube. And then we're on all your favorite avenues to get your podcast, Spotify, iTunes, and then when we do our show, we also stream live on X, Instagram, and I think the other one is like Twitch, I believe, as well. So
Barry Trotz, Nashville Predators, making sure you're listening to Full Press Hockey Podcast.